Leaders at the G20 summit have agreed on the joint declaration tackling the climate crisis and other global challenges. Host nation South Africa says there was overwhelming consensus behind the statement, even with the U.S. boycotting the talks.
The adoption of the declaration from the summit sends an important signal to the world that multilateralism can and does deliver. It sends a message of hope and solidarity across the world.
South African President Cyril Ramaphosa opened the summit in Johannesburg, stressing the need for multilateralism to confront international threats. He also warned that growing wealth and development gaps pose one of the biggest risks to sustainable global growth. Under South Africa's presidency, the summit's focus is on fighting inequality and climate change, from disaster preparedness to financing the green transition and making sure the boom in critical minerals benefits the countries that produce them. And Ollie Barrett is covering this story for CNA from Johannesburg. Ollie, thank you for joining us. What more do we know about the G20 summit declaration?
Yeah, I can hear you as I say. All good, loud and clear.
Ollie, what more do we know about the G20 summit declaration?
Well, the declaration that seems to have been agreed between the leaders that are here does talk about climate change. Well, the declaration that leaders here seem to have agreed does talk about climate change in a way that clearly wouldn't have been agreed to by the United States were they here. It talks about language such as the seriousness of climate change and the need to better adapt to it. The declaration talks about ambitious targets to boost renewable energy. It talks about the punishing levels of debt service that many developing nations have to deal with and calls for action to help them deal with it. As well, there is also going to be mentions of the use of critical minerals in an equitable way around the world too. So it does seem that there has been some consensus reached here in Johannesburg. That is something that's going to annoy the United States, which had told South Africa not to issue a leaders' declaration because the US isn't in attendance at this summit. Well, it looks like that declaration is indeed going to be issued on Sunday. South African officials that we've been speaking to here believe that they have reached what they call a unanimous consensus for the member states that actually are here in Johannesburg in the absence of the United States.
Ollie, help us understand how effective can this declaration be, given that the US has boycotted the talks, and what can we expect from the rest of the summit?
Well, the absence of the United States is certainly, to an extent, overshadowing proceedings here. It is something that South African officials continue to be asked about right through the summit. One controversy that remains is the handover ceremony that would have been due to take place on Sunday between South Africa and the United States. The Americans had suggested that they would send a diplomatic team to take part in that ceremonial handover of the presidency. South Africa insists that President Cyril Ramaphosa will not be handing over to what they call a junior diplomatic team. So there is still an ongoing row, really, between the United States and South Africa. And we've had one White House official quoted as describing the seeming agreement of a declaration here as shameful. So if there was any hope that relations between the United States and South Africa might be eased over the course of this weekend, it seems that those hopes are being dashed.
Many thanks for that update. Ollie Barrett there covering this story for CNA from Johannesburg.